I've always been a skeptic. Ghosts, demons, and the supernatural never seemed more than stories to me. Tales to keep children from wandering too far into the woods, or urban legends to spice up late-night conversations. But something happened last year that changed everything. It began when I inherited my grandmother's house in rural Pennsylvania. She passed away unexpectedly, and since no one else in the family wanted to deal with the upkeep of an old Victorian home in the middle of nowhere, the responsibility fell to me. At first, I wasn't thrilled about it, but the idea of having a place to call my own eventually won me over. So I packed my things and moved in, determined to restore the house and make it livable again. The house itself was beautiful, though it had clearly seen better days. Tall and narrow, with steep gables and intricate wooden trim, it stood on the edge of a dense forest. The nearest neighbor was nearly a mile away, and the only sounds at night were the rustling of leaves and the occasional hoot of an owl. During the day, the house was charming in a shabby kind of way, but at night, it was a different story. The first night I heard it, a faint tapping. It started just as I was settling into bed. At first I thought it was just an old house settling, but then the pattern changed. It was deliberate, rhythmic. Tap, tap, tap. It seemed to come from the walls, but whenever I got up to investigate, it stopped. I checked every room, every window, every door, nothing. I convinced myself it was just my imagination and went back to bed. The tapping continued for several nights. By the end of the week, I was so sleep-deprived that I decided to record it. I set up my phone and left it running while I tried to sleep. The next morning, I reviewed the recording. The tapping was there, clear as day, but then, at around 3 a.m., something else happened. There was a voice, a faint whisper that sent chills down my spine. "Why are you here?" I played it back over and over, trying to convince myself it was just some kind of interference or maybe my own sleep-deprived brain playing tricks on me. But the voice was unmistakable. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the house. Sure. I'd like to say I packed up and left right then and there, but curiosity got the better of me. I needed to know what was going on. I spent the next few days digging through my grandmother's belongings, searching for anything that might explain the strange occurrences. That's when I found the letters. They were hidden in a false bottom of an old trunk in the attic. Dozens of letters, all addressed to my grandmother. They were from a man named Thomas, and they painted a picture of a relationship that was passionate but deeply troubled. The last letter stood out. It was dated the day before my grandmother's wedding to my grandfather, and it was angry, desperate. "If I can't have you, no one will," it read. "You belong to me, and I'll never let you go." The handwriting was jagged, almost frantic. It sent a shiver through me, but I told myself it was just an old love affair gone wrong. It didn't explain the tapping or the whispering. At least that's what I thought at the time. Things escalated after I found the letters. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. I started seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye, dark shapes that disappeared when I turned to look. And the whispers became more frequent. Sometimes they were angry, other times pleading, but always just barely audible, like someone speaking from the other side of a wall. One night, I decided to confront whatever was happening. I sat in the living room with all the lights off, my phone recording in one hand and a flashlight in the other. Around 2 a.m., the tapping started again, this time louder than ever. It seemed to come from the walls, the ceiling, even the floor. I called out, my voice trembling. "Who's there?" The tapping stopped. For a long moment there was silence. Then a whisper, clearer than ever before. "How did you bring me back?" The flashlight flickered and went out. Panic set in, but I forced myself to stay put. I demanded to know who was speaking, what they wanted. The response was immediate and chilling. "You should have left me buried." The room grew cold, so cold I could see my breath. The air felt heavy, oppressive. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The warmth returned, and the flashlight flickered back on. But I wasn't alone. On the floor in front of me was a single footprint, wet and muddy, as if someone had just stepped out of a river. I didn't sleep that night. I spent hours researching the house, my grandmother, anything that might explain what was happening. That's when I stumbled upon an old newspaper article from 1952. It was about a man named Thomas Grayson who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. He was last seen near the woods behind my grandmother's house. His body was never found. The pieces clicked into place. Thomas had been my grandmother's lover, the man who had written those letters. He hadn't just disappeared, he had died, and somehow he was still here. But why now? Why after all these years? I decided to search the woods. I don't know what I was expecting to find, but something drew me there, some invisible thread pulling me deeper and deeper among the trees. It didn't take long to find it. A small clearing with a single unmarked grave. The ground looked undisturbed, but I knew instinctively what it was. I don't remember digging. I must have used my hands because my fingernails were broken and bloody by the time I hit something solid. It was a small wooden box. Inside was a bundle of letters, just like the ones I'd found in the attic, but these were different. They were never sent, and they told a much darker story. Thomas hadn't just been an obsessed lover. He had been dangerous, violent. My grandmother had tried to break things off, but he wouldn't let her go. The last letter ended with a chilling confession. "I'll never let you marry him. You'll see." I felt a presence behind me and turned, expecting to see nothing. Instead, I saw him. Thomas. He was pale and gaunt, his clothes dripping with water, his eyes hollow and black. He didn't speak, but I felt his anger, his pain. And then he was gone. I burned the letters that night, every single one of them, including the ones from the attic. I don't know why I thought it would help, but it felt like the right thing to do. The tapping stopped after that, and the whispers faded. For a while, it seemed like everything was back to normal. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. A faint tapping, just beyond the edge of hearing. And I can't help but wonder if Thomas is still out there, waiting, watching. Or if, somehow, I've become part of his story now, a new chapter in a tale that will never truly end.